Hey, welcome back. In this video, we'll be building out a front-end and back-end authentication system with admin roles and certain actions restricted to content creators. We'll be building a Medium-esque blogging platform with blogs, with posts within them. We're going to be using AWS Amplify and React. I want to say that this is not a beginner React or Amplify tutorial. I do have videos for both of those though, so I will link those down in the description below. So what we're actually going to do for this tutorial is start with some boilerplate code. I already created the React forms and added React router so that we don't need to go back through those things. If you're new to them though, please pause this video, learn about those things, and then come back. So what I'm going to have you do is clone down the repository for this tutorial. So if you go to github.com/aspittle/React authorization, and I will again link this in the description bar. So clone down this repo. Once you have it cloned down, go ahead and run npm install. There are a couple things already loaded into this repository like AWS Amplify and the Amplify UI React components. Other than that, it's pretty much a boilerplate create a React app. You can take a minute to go through the code. I will also talk a little bit about it without diving too deep because again, I want to focus on the authorization parts of this instead of focusing too heavily on React. But if you want to go through that, go ahead and pause the video and do so. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the AWS console and go to Amplify within there. I'm going to create a new app, which will be an app backend, and I'll call it Amp Blog. You can really call it whatever you want here. And then we'll click Create. Now that that's done deploying, I'll open up the admin UI. The first thing that I'm going to do is actually enable authentication. And I'll just use all the defaults and save and deploy them. So it'll be email login and no additional attributes or anything like that. So I'll click Save and Deploy and confirm deployment. It'll take a few minutes to deploy. Awesome, now that our authentication system has deployed, I'm going to go over to the data tab. So I'm going to add two models here. The first will be blog. So there could be a travel blog, there could be a personal blog, just like on how Medium has different publications. That's essentially what this is. And I'll do a name here and I'll make that required. So I can make it required by focusing on it and then clicking is required. That's all that a blog will have. We'll also add a second model and I'll reorder them. This one will be called post. Each post will have a title, which will be a string that's required. And then content, which is also a string, and then an owner, which is also a string, and we'll make that required as well. The owner will be the person who created the post's email, and that will match up with the email of a user. We could set this up within our authorization system, but it's a little bit more difficult, so we'll simplify this by adding this extra field onto my post. Now I'm going to add my authorization roles. So if I click on my blog, you'll see that I have this bar on the side here where I can add different rules. Anyone authenticated with an API key can create, read, update, and delete a blog. I actually want to change this so that anybody can read a blog. So unsigned in users can look at content, but only people who are in an admin group can actually update and delete and create new blogs. So I'll add an authorization rule here and I'll create a group. I'll call it admin. And users in the admin group can do anything with blogs. So if somebody's not an admin, then they won't be able to do these extra things. But if they are, then they will be able to. Then on our posts, we're going to again make it so that anybody can read a post, and then we're going to enable owner authorization. So we're going to make it so that non-owners can only read, whereas the owners of a post can update and delete it. And then anybody who's signed in will be able to create a post. So anybody signed in with a Cognito user pool will be able to create. Now we're going to go ahead and save and deploy our models. Now that our deployment's successful, I'm going to copy this command here and go to my terminal and run the amplify pull command. If it asks, fill in your text editor type of app, then it's React and all these defaults. I'll say yes, I plan on modifying the backend, even though I won't. Still a good thing to have, just in case. Now I'm going to open up my code. The first place that I'm going to go is my index.js. It's just the default, really, other than React Router being implemented. The one thing that I'm going to add is configuration for Amplify. So I'll import Amplify and auth mode strategy type from AWS Amplify. I will also import the AWS config from the AWS exports file. This will overall link my front end to my back end. I'm going to run amplify configure. And inside of there, I'll use my AWS config. So I'll copy it over. And then I do need to do a little bit extra for data store. But I'm using this multi-auth, so I have multiple auth strategies. I do need to set that up independently here. So I'll say data store auth mode strategy type is auth mode strategy type dot multi auth. So this is what I imported here, this auth mode strategy type. I need to make it an uppercase A right here. Strategy, spelling is hard. So I imported this auth mode strategy type right here, used it, and then used multi-auth off of it. I need to spell strategy correctly on this side of the object as well. You don't need to memorize this. It's in the documentation. I've always copied and pasted it before, so I don't need to worry about misspelling variables, but this is just going to allow me to use those different types of authorization that I set up using the admin UI. So now that I've configured that, I'm going to go to my app.js. Right now, I have quite a few routes set up. So I'm using React Router to create different paths that render different components. I also have a couple state variables set up, and we'll be using them in our code. Just wanted to pre-write those. The one route that's written right now is the blogs page, and so this just has the header for those blogs, and then it loops through them. Right now, that blogs array is just an empty array, but inside the use effect, we'll implement a query to fetch them. So it loops through the blogs, renders them on the page. So what I'm going to do is I'm first going to import my blog model. So When I ran Amplify pull, it generated this models directory. Inside of there, there's a model for each one of my models that I created in the admin UI. They're in TypeScript, so the VS Code handling is pretty nice for them. And then inside of get data, I'm going to say const blog data equals await data store.query for my blogs. And then I'll say set blogs with my blog data. We'll put this all in a try catch as well. One thing to note is that we will get an error if the user is not authenticated. We're going to actually implement the user authentication right here. So const user is equal to await auth.current authenticated user. So this will get a user if that user is signed in. If they're not signed in, then we'll get an error message. Totally fine. You could do better handling on this so that you get a message about that instead. But we'll make it so that people can still view the blogs even if they're not signed in, but certain routes will be hidden for them so that they're not going to forms that they can't actually do anything with. Then we'll also figure out if the user is an admin or not. We'll use this setIsAdmin function that we generated using useState and use that to set whether the user is an admin or not. So this user object has a sign-in user session object within it, and then an access token object, and then within the payload, you can get the cognito groups and check to see if there is the admin within that. It's an array. So that's why we're checking to see if admin is in it. If the user is an admin, they will have the role admin attached to them. If they're not, then they won't, and this will be false. So we're essentially setting this is admin to true or false, depending on whether they are signed in or not. We'll also set the user with the user that we got back. So we're using the set user from useState with this user that we just got it from auth.current authenticated user. So you can see that our app is still the same. We haven't actually created any blogs yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to this sign in. So I have this sign in page component right here. I'm going to use the with authenticator higher order component on my sign in to make it so that people have to sign in order to get to this page. So now inside of the app.js, I'm going to include certain links if the user is signed in and others if they're not. So what I'm going to say here is if there is not the user.attributes. So if the user object is an empty object, then we're going to have a link to the sign in page. This link component is from React Router. Behind the scenes, it's essentially an A tag with a nice transition on it. So if we're not signed in, if the user does not have any information, we'll have a link to sign in. That being said, if they are signed in, then we'll want to allow them to sign up. We'll add an onClick handler, and within that, we'll add an async function and await for auth.sign out. So if the user is signed in, we'll allow them to sign out. So now you see that we have this sign in button, and we can create an account right here. This will work as is, but I'm actually going to go back to the admin UI and create one within there so that we can make it into an admin a little bit faster. Okay, so back in this admin UI, I'm going to go into manage groups. I'm going to create a user. I'm going to add a password for them. And then with this user, I am going to open them up and add them to a group. So I'm going to add my user to the admin group. So now I will go back to my React app here, and I'm going to sign in with that account that I just created. Now I'll create a new password, skip verification for now, and then I can go back home. That React router link is to the wrong place, but now you can see that we have a sign out button instead of that sign in link. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add some blogs. So I'm going to go to the content tab within the admin UI, and here I'm going to create a blog. So I'll do travel as one. And then I'll do code as the second one. Very generic blogs, that's okay. So now I will refresh my page, and you can see that those two blogs that I created in the admin UI now exist. So to do a quick recap, I have queried for my blogs. I have implemented an authorization system, and then I've also made it so that there's either a sign in or a sign out button on this page. You can also make it into a ternary instead of doing those two different if conditions. Just those can get a little bit long in React. There's always a infinite number of ways of implementing things. That's the fun of code. So now if you click on one of those blogs, you can see that it takes you to the blog travel URL, for example, for travel. Again, this is implemented using React Router. So now I need to actually implement this blog page and make it so that the blog's information shows up on here. So I'm going to go into the blog page.js right here. You can see that it's getting the user object as props. It's getting the name of the blog from the parameters. This is, again, a React Router function. And then we also have the posts already set up in state and a boilerplate use effect. And again, we're just looping through the posts and displaying them on the page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to query for my blog that matches the name. So const data equals await data store.query for my blog, which I need to import. And then I am going to actually filter through those blogs and only get the one whose name equals the name that we want. So the name that we're getting from the parameters, we're making sure that that matches the name of the blog that we're getting all the information about. Then we're going to go ahead and get our posts that belong to this blog. but we only want the posts whose blog ID equals the blog we found in this query right here. And then we'll set the posts array with those posts we got back. So this made me realize that I did not actually make a relationship between the blog and the posts. So we're going to go ahead and update that. We're going to make it so that a blog has many posts. So we will have one blog to many posts right here. Click save and then save and deploy. So I forgot something, but we can quickly fix it. Now that that's deployed, I will re-pull Amplify pull in order to update those things that I changed. Amazing. So now if I go back to my app on my travel blog, I no longer get an error. And what I'll want to do is back in the admin UI, I will go ahead and add some posts to my blogs. So I'll create a test post right here. Hello, hi. And I will add myself as the owner. So I'll save this post right here. You could create multiple if you wanted to. Okay, so now that we have that implemented, our page now looks like this. So again, we got all of the blogs whose names equal the one in the URL, and then we fetched the posts whose blog ID matched the one that we found using this query. Now we got that working. Now we need to make it so that the posts each have a page. So if I go to this hello post, it has more than just its name. It also has this form filled out with the actual content from that blog post. So we've got the post model already imported, and what we're going to do within here is we are going to find the post with the name equal to the one in the URL. So again, we've got the name from the URL. We're going to use that to find the blog with the right title. Or sorry, the post with the right title. So we're going to set the post with the posts sub-0. So the first post that we get from that query, hypothetically, there should just be one. That being said, if we were to build something bigger, we might want to use the ID for it or create like a UUID so that each one is guaranteed to be unique so that we can have blogs with the same title or multiple blog posts and multiple blogs with the same title. So I am setting the post the title with the title and then the content right here. So now you can see that this form is pre-filled out with the content. And then the next thing that I need to do is implement this handle submit. So this is how you update a post with data source. So you actually copy the original post, which is stored right here in state. There will be a callback function with the updated version of the post. So we'll do updated title is equal to the title that is stored in state. The updated content is equal to the content stored in state. And then the last thing that we need to do is we only want this form to actually show up if the user is the owner of the post. So we already have the backend version of this, so it'll only allow the person who created this post to update it. But we also want to add this logic to make it so that the form only shows up to them. So on the front end, people aren't just given this form that they can't do anything with. So first we're going to make sure that there is a user. So user.attributes. And we want the post.owner to equal the user.attributes.email. And if so, that's when we want to actually render all of this form. So we still see it because we're logged in with that hello@WeLearnCode email, and we can update this post. Now if I update it and refresh the page, this is going to change the title, so I need to go back to the travel blog and then look at it there. But you can see that I updated the title to hello. Of course, in a production app, you'd want to have better error handling than what I have here. But this is how you can make it so that only the owner gets the form. So now we need to implement this on the blog form as well. So we've got this blog create form, and this one we're going to actually create the form on a separate page. So what we're going to do is first add a link on the app.js. So right here, if the user is an admin, then we'll make it so that they have a link to create a new blog. So now if you go back to your app and go back to the home page, you'll see that we have this link to create a blog. And we have this form. So let's go ahead and implement the logic for this. So I'm going to go into the blog create form, and you can see again, I created the boilerplate form for this and some initial state. But what we'll go ahead and do here is we'll import that blog model. And inside of here, we'll create a new blog. With that name. You can go ahead and console log that new blog if you want to. The other thing that I'm going to do here is if the person took the direct route to the create page, so they were not signed in, they weren't an admin, and they went to /blog create, we're going to make it so that they see an error page instead of this form. So what I'll do here, if not is admin, return h2, you aren't allowed on this page. Else, that's when we'll return the form. So I'll create a new blog called hello here. Then I'll go back to the home page. Again, you'd want all these redirects and things like that within a production app. I've just done the bare minimum here. But now if I sign out, and I'll have to refresh again, I haven't done any of these fancy UI things, then you can see that I no longer have this create link. And if I go to blog create, you can see you aren't allowed on this page. So to wrap this up, in this tutorial, we added multi-auth to Amplify React app and made it so that different users had the ability to do different things within our application. So quick introduction to that. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Give me a comment below with what you'd like to see next time. And so excited to chat again. Have a great week.